What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm simply going to go through some of your drafts ahead of Game Week 17. So if you do enjoy the video and you find it useful, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Just before we get into the first draft, I wanted to go through some of the numbers that I collected. So I put out a tweet asking for you to send me over your teams. I wasn't really sure how many replies I was going to get because the World Cup's not quite over yet, and I didn't know how much people have switched back onto FPL, but I got over 200 replies and I went through 50 of those teams to see which players were popular. So as you can see, when it comes to defenders, it was around 33 or 34 of those teams that I went through had at least one Arsenal defender, and I guess it's not too surprising because they are pretty good value, right? I don't think any of them cost more than 5.3, 5.4 million. The defense has been brilliant. They've got a double game week. I think it's game week 23. So it's no surprise to see them quite high up. Cancelo was also in a lot of teams. Obviously, Man City have got the 2 double game weeks as well. He's probably one of the only defenders that's almost absolutely nailed on, maybe not completely, but he does start pretty much every game, so he was just over 30. I did look at different City defenders because I talked about Akanji in a video recently. A few people have left comments saying, why aren't you talking about Kyle Walker more? But ultimately, those kind of 2 players and other City defenders that aren't Cancelo are not that popular at the moment. That may change as we get closer to the deadline. Then you got the midfielders, so I counted a lot more of these. Almiron, the most popular midfielder in all the drafts that I went through. I know he scored a lot of points. I know he's a really good price, and a lot of people are trying to get those 2, maybe 3 premiums in the team. And Newcastle do have some pretty good fixtures, but I was surprised that he was right at the top. It does show, when you look at the numbers for De Bruyne and Salah, there isn't really, at least at the moment, a standout premium midfielder pick in terms of the drafts that were sent through. Now, sometimes you see that when we're still a week and a half out from the deadline, and then everyone starts converging a bit, but I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think there's a lot of people that still back in Salah, possibly myself included, but the double game weeks are swinging people towards De Bruyne, remembering that they're pretty much the same price at this point. Martinelli wasn't too far behind Almiron, so probably a lot of people in a similar position to me, where they don't really want to lose that value that's been built up in him. And then in terms of Man United midfielders, Rashford was the most popular, just behind Martinelli. Fernandes in less than 10 teams of the 50 that I checked. I keep going back and forth on whether I think he's a good option or not. I think the main problem for me is just it's that short-termness, where for 3 fixtures he could be a really nice option, but then you're probably going to want to move him on. And again, it's not to say that against Man City and Arsenal, Man United can't get goals, but that's a lot of money, nearly 10 million to have invested for those 2 tough fixtures. And then Foden, not really that popular either. I do wonder if that's just because of the minutes and obviously the benches that we had just before the World Cup break. And then just lastly, onto the forwards, Haaland was in every single team. So I checked 50 teams. Haaland was in every single one. Not surprising whatsoever. If he's fit, most people are going to be captaining him kind of week in, week out. I thought what was interesting that Darwin Núñez and Mitrovic were in the same amount of teams. Not always in the same team, of course, but Darwin is proven to be popular. So I think what might be happening is people like Liverpool have not done as well so far this season as we probably expect them to do. Obviously, people talk about eye tests and stuff all the time. They've not necessarily looked great, but I don't think people are kind of willing to give up on them completely. So I guess the compromise by not having Salah is to have Núñez instead, which is not necessarily a bad play. If it was like Núñez and De Bruyne or Salah and a Man City forward, obviously you can't get a Man City forward that cheap, and everyone's going to have Haaland anyway. So maybe that is the best way to go about it. Mitrovic still quite popular. He is on 4 yellow cards, so 1 more and he will be suspended. That will go up to 10 yellow cards once Fulham reach 19 games. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Mitrovic. And then Kane and Martial just not that popular right now. So that's the numbers. Let's take a look at the drafts. All right, let's take a look at the first draft. Now, if you follow FPL Rhinos on Twitter, you'll know that he likes to think a bit more outside of the box. He's more of a maverick FPL manager compared to someone like me. And although I would say that this draft is thinking a bit more outside of the box, in theory it could work because of the teams that are being targeted. So you've got 3 triple ups, You got 3 players from Arsenal, 3 from Man City, and 3 from Man United. So the 2 best teams in the league so far this season, and of course Man United, which I wish it was the other way around, but it isn't. But we know they've got 3 really nice fixtures after the Christmas break. And then the other 2 players that make up the 11 are from Chelsea. So in theory, you've got 4 pretty strong sides there that have either got really nice fixtures and or double game weeks. So Chelsea, Man City and Arsenal have all got at least 1 double game week to come by the time we get to game week 23. So I like the kind of thinking there. I guess to get the obvious stuff out of the way, at the time we're recording, Kepa and Reece James are still flagged. As I've said a few times now, Chelsea do have another friendly before the game week 17 deadline. So if they both line up in that fixture, I think maybe not skyrocket, but Kepa's ownership will go up quite a bit because he's only 4.5 million. And no matter what you think of the Chelsea defence and how maybe poorly it's performed so far this season compared to what we expect, 4.5 million still seems like quite a bit of a bargain. I think if Reece James starts that friendly as well, and it does look, as first choice 11 as you can get under Graham Potter, I think his ownership will go up as well. Maybe not quite as much as Kepa's because people have been hurt by him so far this season. But having owned him a lot over the last kind of season or two, we know what he is capable of, right? He is that defender that could go and get you a 15 to an 18 pointer. If he does concede, he could get an attack and return, etc. I still think he's a really nice price. I guess the main issue with him is, one, obviously that Chelsea defence, right? Will it actually improve? And 2, how many games is he going to be able to play in quick succession? Because the first 3 fixtures after the break, there's not too much rest time between each of those games, and he's just back from injury, right? So he's not played a competitive game for a little while. I know that everyone's been on a break, but obviously he was injured before that happened. So that might be a slight issue, but in some ways I think he could be worth it. Looking at the other triple ups, a lot of people have issues going for either triple ups in defence or attack, because in defence, if your team concedes 1 goal, then all your defenders lose the clean sheet. And in attack, if you've got 3 players from Man United and they only go and score 1 goal, you're probably not getting too many points for that. I don't really have an issue with it. I think if you think Bruno Fernandes is a good option, and you also think Martial is a good option in their own right, then there's no harm in doubling up. So if you want to add 1 more, it's not really the end of the world. I do think personally that Rashford is a better option than Antony. So as long as Ten Hag says, he's back from England duty, etc., and he's fit, he would be the one that I would go for instead of Antony. I just think he's a bit more of a goal threat. But I like the thinking with Man United because of those 3 fixtures. The main issue for me is not that they might only go and score 1 goal in one of the games. It's that when you get to game week 20 and they got Man City, and then game week 21 they've got Arsenal, you've then got 3 players to deal with who have got 2 tough fixtures. Now, they may well do well in those games, right? They'll probably try and counter. Ronaldo's not there anymore. That could improve Fernandes' chances of getting FPL points, etc. But that would still worry me a little bit that if they haven't performed over those 3 games, you've suddenly got 3 players to deal with. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of them all straight away, but it might stop you doing other moves. So as much as I'd love to sit here and say a triple up on Man United attack is definitely a great option, I think probably 1 or 2 is more fair and what I would look to do. I don't think with Man City, Haaland, De Bruyne, Foden, Cancelo, you pick 3 of those 4, you're probably onto a winner. Everyone's going to have Haaland anyway. As I showed just a minute ago, 50 of the 50 teams had Haaland in. I think De Bruyne versus Salah, I think it's absolutely fair if you want to go for De Bruyne. The main problem with Foden, I guess, is the amount of times he got benched before the World Cup break. So 3 of the last 4 fixtures for Man City in the league, he was benched for. Now, I think if he'd been benched for that final game as well, that would have really put me off. But I'm just hoping that whatever was going on is sorted there. And I don't think for 1 second, if we come over to the FPL page, that Foden is going to start all of these games. And I know FPL Rhinos won't be thinking the same as well either. But if he starts the majority, maybe only misses 1 or 2, he could still be excellent value at 8.3 million. I highlighted up to here because that's when the second double game week is. So I still really like him as an option. I don't really have a huge amount of concerns with this team as long as all the players are fit and available. I think with Arsenal, I think you've got to be the type of FPL manager that can cope with the triple up, that if the goal goes in, you're not going to react badly, because it can be frustrating. But when it comes to value, there aren't many players that are better value than those Arsenal boys. Maybe Trippier, for example, a lot of people would have got on him at 5 million. He could definitely be a better option than one of those players and maybe just double up on Arsenal. But if you're going to commit, that is the way to do it. So this is a draft that's thinking a bit more outside of the box. How many of you are on that many triple ups? I would say probably not many. So draft number 2 is a 3 premium attacker setup. So you've got Salah in midfield, and then the forward line you've got Haaland and Harry Kane. Now when I first saw this draft, my thoughts were there's not really too much wrong with it, right? I'm someone that tends to avoid 3 premium attacker setups because you can only captain one of them. And when you're starting to get to the price points of 11, 12, 13 million, part of the value in those players lies in being able to captain them. And straight away you've got Salah with Villa away, Kane with Brentford away, and Haaland with Leeds away. And of course, who is the captain's armband on? It's on Haaland, like it will be for the majority of game weeks, right from game week 17 up until 23. But that only really matters if you're missing out on better value elsewhere. So at the start of the season, I preferred the 2 premium attacker setup because you could do a couple of different things, like get Trent and Cancelo, or maybe get a few £8 million midfielders like Kulusevski, Mount, Saka, etc. But that possibly doesn't matter as much anymore, because if you look outside of those 3 players, okay, you've got Ward and Everson as the goalkeepers. Like I've just said for the draft number 1, maybe Kepa will become a better option, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Ward and Everson given the fixtures that Leicester have got, given the fact we've got a second wild card as well, which we can change things around later on. Then the actual defence. Okay, you've got Ben White. I do think Gabriel is a better option, but in terms of purely clean sheets only, Ben White's going to get exactly the same amount as Gabriel. I don't know if there's too much risk about rotation with Ben White, because obviously Tomiyasu could play. They could play Tierney or Zinchenko when fit on the left. But I think Ben White will continue to start the majority of games, so not a huge issue. Cancelo's still in there. Right now, I don't think that most people would argue, including myself, that you need Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I don't think that matters. And of course, Trippier's in. And Newcastle have got great fixtures. Everyone loves him. The defence looks fine. And on the bench, you've got Castagna and Botman. I'm not 100% sure about Castagna. You've got a triple up on Leicester there. So if you want to get an attacker in like Maddison or someone like that down the line, you're going to be a bit stuck. But he's an okay option in his own right, fairly attacking, etc. Then in midfield, you've got one of those £8 million midfielders. It's Phil Foden. I've already kind of talked about him a little bit. I think he's perfectly fine. Martinelli, as we've shown with the numbers at the start, a lot of people are going to keep him. And Almiron was the most popular midfielder. So of course, right, if Maddison and Saka continue to do really well, it might be worth downgrading one of those premium attackers and upgrading Martinelli and or Almiron to one of those 8 millions. But I don't think on paper it looks terrible whatsoever. And then the other forward is Mitrovic, who again is super popular, and the only real issue with him is just that 4 yellow card situation. But apart from that, he looks like a really good pick. So I've written down, does captaincy matter in terms of should you only have 1 or 2 of these players if you're definitely going to captain them? In this situation, I don't think it does. If you decide that you want to go to De Bruyne, okay, you've got to free up a spot, so you'd have to get rid of Foden or Cancelo, but you've got Salah there to kind of switch. You don't have to make an additional 3rd or 4th transfer to get to him. And if at any point you do want to upgrade someone else, you've only got to downgrade one of those players. And it could be, I think one of the reasons that some people do this is that you can see who looks in better form or which teams are performing better. So if it comes to after the World Cup break that actually Kane isn't doing as well and suddenly Salah looks great, then Kane is the one you make the downgrade on rather than having to shuffle around later on to get those funds. So look, are there players that I would upgrade? Yeah, White to Gabriel. I probably would have like Maddison or Saka in instead of Almiron, maybe someone like Rashford as well. But that's just my personal preference. Lots of people love Almiron and just think he should be in his own right. So if you're thinking about going for 3 premium attackers and it's what you want to do, I would not try and talk yourself out of it. In previous seasons, I don't think it's worked whatsoever, especially last season, but it was viable at the start of this season. It's worked for some people, and it continues to look pretty viable, I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And then with draft number 3, I think there's 2 main talking points, right? There's no premium midfielder. Is that a viable option for our Game Week 17 squads? And then are Spurs fixtures good enough for an attacking double up? Because in this draft they've got Kulusevski and Harry Kane. So that's what I want to talk about first of all. To be fair, on an individual level, Kane's done really well in the Premier League so far this season. I think if Haaland had never joined Man City, we'd be talking about Harry Kane a lot more because he has had a great season. It just so happens that Haaland has come in and he's absolutely ridiculous. And when fit, Kulusevski has done really well as well. So if we go to the FPL page, we'll take a quick look at Spurs' fixtures. So they do have a double game week, although it's in game week 20, and it is probably about as difficult a double as you're going to get. Arsenal at home and Man City away. But outside of that, I would say the first 3 fixtures after the break are not bad. Brentford away, that's not really a defence that would worry me too much. Villa at home is pretty good. I guess Emery could make Villa a tougher team to break down, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens, how quickly he can get that moving. And Palace haven't defended as well, anywhere near as well, I would say, as they did last season. So those 3 fixtures aren't bad. Then you've got a difficult double game week, but it's always a bonus to have that extra fixture. And then it's Fulham away. So from 17 to 21, it's not bad, right? So I think you can justify having the Spurs double up. If I come back to the draft itself, it's actually tricky to know what to do, because if you ditch Harry Kane, you could go for someone like Callum Wilson instead. You could maybe shuffle the funds around and go for Darwin Núñez and then go for that premium midfielder. But you couldn't go for Kevin De Bruyne because you've got that triple up on Man City. So I guess in that case, you'd have to go Foden to someone like Saka or Maddison and then get Kevin De Bruyne. Now, personally, I do think, you know, up until probably game week 23, and we're actually looking quite far away at that point, because you've got 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's like 7 game weeks away, right? So it is a long way away to be thinking. But Man City's single game week fixtures, I would say, are better than Spurs, and they've got those 2 double game weeks. So it is worth considering now. Like, you look at Leeds away, Everton at home, I would say that's better than what Spurs have got. They've got to play Chelsea away, which isn't ideal, but a Man City attack is pretty damn good. Their double game week in 20 is better. Then it's Wolves at home. It's better to have Man City playing Spurs away probably than it is Spurs having to play Man City. Although, to be fair, over the last few seasons, Spurs have done all right against Man City. They usually get a goal, right? We've seen Son obviously do really well in particular, and Kane's usually the one supplying. And then they got another double game week. So I would say, like, if in isolation, De Bruyne is just better than Harry Kane. You've just got to shuffle the other positions around. You could just keep Kulusevski if you wanted and just do Foden up to De Bruyne. But I think I would want that premium midfielder there, because we go back to that captaincy thing. Most of the time you're going to captain Haaland anyway. And if he does get injured, that is an easy switch to Harry Kane. Whereas with Harry Kane, there's not really an obvious switch in and around that price without just going into the midfield. And I know Harry Kane's a little bit cheaper, but I just think it's probably worth going for De Bruyne or even possibly Salah. I think Salah is maybe a little bit of a harder sell because they don't have a double game week, and it's not like their fixtures are amazing or anything like that, but he has also had that rest over the World Cup break, so he's going to be fit and ready to go for Liverpool. You could say again on the flip side that they're missing Diaz, Jota, that might make them a worse team, but I think Salah will be fine. So is it viable to go without a premium midfielder? I would say yes, just because of how many midfielders there are to consider. So in this team, you've got Rashford, Kulusevski, Foden and Martinelli. You could look at Mason Mount. You could look at Maddison as well. Almiron's obviously not in this team. Saka as well. So there's plenty of options there. And if you really think that Kane is just an out-and-out better option than De Bruyne and Salah, or you just don't like the cheaper forward options, that is definitely a way you could go. I personally will go for a premium midfielder because I can always switch to the other one. Like if I go for De Bruyne, then I need to switch to Salah, or vice versa, I can do that. But again, you are pretty much just 2 moves away from doing this, or doing that same move with this team as well. It is worth noting they've got Martinelli on the bench, I guess because of the fixtures for the defenders, but most weeks it's going to be a 3-4-3 anyway. So the rest of the team looks fine and pretty standard, right? Kepa in goal and James, spoken about them a bit already. Cancelo looks good, so does Trippier. Dalot I don't mind, but Varane and Martinez are going to be missing for Man United right at the start. I was going to say of the season, but after the break. That is a possible issue, because if they miss the first 2 games, and you've only got one more decent fixture for Man United, and then it's into Man City and Arsenal. So it really depends how often you're going to play Dalot. If you're going to play him maybe in a couple of the good fixtures, then be able to bench him, like you probably can in this team because of Martinelli on the bench, that might be okay. But I do think Man United are going to be weaker because of the players that are missing. So let me know in the comments below, do you think going without a premium midfielder is viable? What do you think about that double up on the Spurs attack? I think the fixtures are okay. I'm just not sure it's what I will do. I like Harry Kane. I guess in isolation I like them both, so I can't really argue too much. But I do think that Maddison, possibly Mason Mount, and even Saka are better options than Kulusevski. But he has looked great, not just this season, but since he came into the Spurs side. So maybe I'm going to be completely wrong about that. Let me know what you think about all the teams we've spoken about and my thoughts in the comments below. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I'll catch you again soon.